The evening sun dipped low across the suburban neighborhood, painting golden streaks across the white picket fences and quiet lawns. Inside the Ramirez home, life seemed ordinary. The living room echoed with the laughter of a 5-year-old girl as she played with her stuffed animals, while her mother, Claire, cleaned up the kitchen. Her husband, David, worked late at the office, so evenings were usually just the two of them until bedtime. It had become their rhythm, simple and safe. But safety was a fragile illusion. That night, while tidying up the playroom, Claire noticed something unusual. Nestled between her daughter's toys was the pink teddy bear her little girl had carried everywhere since Christmas. At first glance, nothing seemed strange, but as Claire leaned down to place it back on the shelf, her hand brushed against a small plastic seam near its button nose. She frowned. That wasn't there before. Curiosity made her press against the seam, and to her shock, the fabric shifted slightly, revealing a tiny black lens hidden deep within the stitching. Her stomach lurched. Her breath caught in her throat as she dropped the toy back onto the floor. A camera inside her daughter's teddy bear. Her pulse quickened. 1,000 thoughts spiraled at once. Who would do this? How long had it been there? And most terrifying of all, how many moments of her child's life had already been recorded? She grabbed the bear, turning it over in her trembling hands. It was carefully hidden, expertly sewn. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were doing. The idea that every giggle, every nap, every private moment in her child's bedroom could have been watched by strangers made Claire's skin crawl. Her daughter came bouncing into the room, oblivious to the tension clenching her mother's body. "Mommy, can I have juice?" she asked, tugging on Claire's arm. Forcing herself to stay calm, Claire smiled weakly and nodded. She didn't want to scare her little girl. Not yet. She tucked the bear under her arm and walked briskly to the kitchen, her mind racing. Her thoughts kept circling back to the one person who had access to the house besides herself and David, the babysitter, Rachel. She was 21, bright, bubbly, and adored by the child. She had been with the family for nearly a year, and Claire had always trusted her. But the timing fit. Rachel had been in the house alone so many times. If anyone could have planted the camera, it was her. Claire's hands trembled as she dialed David's number. He picked up after a few rings, his voice tired but warm. "Hey, honey. Everything okay?" Her voice shook as she whispered, "David, you need to come home. Now." Within half an hour, David was standing in the kitchen, staring at the teddy bear with the same stunned expression his wife had worn earlier. He touched the hidden lens gently, as if afraid it might come alive. This is insane," he muttered. "Who would do this?" Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. "Rachel. She's the only one who's been here without us. Who else could it be?" The accusation hung heavy in the air. Rachel had always been so sweet, so dependable, so good with their daughter. But the alternative explanation seemed impossible. It had to be her. David ran his hands over his face, struggling to absorb the enormity of the violation. His family's privacy, his daughter's innocence, all shattered by the cruel eye of a hidden lens. "We need to call the police," he finally said, his voice low but firm. The next morning, when Rachel arrived for her babysitting shift, the atmosphere in the house was different. She walked in with her usual cheerful smile, setting down her backpack by the door. But instead of a warm greeting, she was met with the cold stares of Claire and David. "What's wrong?" Rachel asked nervously, glancing between them. Claire held up the teddy bear, her hands trembling with fury. "Do you want to explain this?" Rachel's smile faltered. Her eyes darted to the bear, then back to Claire. What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb with me," Claire snapped, her voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. "There's a camera in here. A camera watching my daughter. Did you think we wouldn't find it?" Rachel's face drained of color. She shook her head furiously. "No, I swear, I didn't do this. I would never, Claire. You have to believe me." But Claire's heart was too full of rage and terror to consider her words. She saw only guilt in Rachel's wide, frightened eyes. David crossed his arms, glaring. "You've had access to this house. You've been alone here. Who else could it be?" Tears welled in Rachel's eyes. "Please, you know me. I love your daughter. I would never hurt her. Someone's setting me up." But the words fell flat. The seed of suspicion had already taken root, and as the police were called to investigate, the Ramirez family braced themselves for a storm far darker than they ever imagined. Because the truth was out there, waiting to surface, and when it did, it would shatter everything. The air in the living room felt heavy as the police officer examined the teddy bear, turning it over with gloved hands. Claire sat stiffly on the couch, her daughter curled up against her side, oblivious to the growing storm. David paced near the window, his jaw tight, his hands clenching into fists. Rachel stood near the doorway, pale as a ghost, tears streaking her cheeks. Detective Harris, a stern man in his late 40s, finally set the bear on the table. His voice was calm, professional, but his words cut through the room like a blade. "This is a professional job. Whoever planted this knew what they were doing. It's not some pranket's deliberate surveillance." Claire's stomach twisted. She glanced at Rachel, who shook her head vigorously, her voice trembling. "I told you I didn't do this. You have to believe me." But Claire's fury boiled over. She shot up from the couch, pointing a finger at the young woman. "You're the only one who could have done it. You've been alone here with my daughter. You've had every opportunity." Rachel's sobs grew louder. "No! I swear on my life, Claire. I would never hurt her. I would never betray you like that." David turned toward the detective. His voice was controlled, but the anger beneath it was unmistakable. "Can you find out where this came from? Trace it? Something?" Detective Harris nodded. "We'll send it to forensics, but it'll take time. In the meantime, we'll need to ask some questions." And so began the long, agonizing hours of interrogation. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, her hands shaking as the detective pressed her with question after question. Where had she been in the past week? Who had she talked to? Did she know anything about surveillance equipment? Did she have debts? Secrets? Rachel answered everything, her voice breaking under the weight of accusation. I don't know anything about cameras. I don't know who would do this. Please, you have to believe me. I love that little girl. She's like family to me. But Claire's eyes burned with distrust. Every word Rachel spoke felt like a lie, a cover-up, a desperate attempt to mask guilt. She couldn't erase the image of the tiny lens staring at her child. Her anger needed a target, and Rachel was standing right in front of her. David, though quieter, felt the same. He remembered the countless evenings Rachel had been alone in their home, trusted to care for their daughter. He remembered how she laughed with the little girl, how natural she seemed in their space. And now, that familiarity felt invasive. Wrong. Like she had wormed her way into their lives only to betray them. Do you know how disgusting this is? David's voice cracked like thunder across the table. You invaded our home. You watched our child. How could you? Rachel's tears fell harder. I didn't. Please, you're making a mistake. Detective Harris raised a hand to calm the room. Mr. Ramirez. Mrs. Ramirez Way can't jump to conclusions. Let us do our job. But the damage was already done. The trust that once bound Rachel to the family had been shattered, replaced by suspicion and fear. Over the next few days, tension consumed the Ramirez household. Claire couldn't sleep. She checked every toy, every nook, every corner of the house for hidden devices. Her daughter, too young to understand, sensed her mother's unease and clung to her constantly. David worked less, staying home more, as though his presence alone could shield his family from invisible eyes. Rachel kept trying to prove her innocence. She sent frantic texts to Claire, begging for forgiveness, asking for updates. Most went unanswered. When Claire finally did respond, her words were sharp. Stay away from us until the police finish their investigation. But the police investigation only deepened the mystery. Forensic analysis revealed that the teddy bear's camera was connected to a small transmitter designed to send footage to an external device. Whoever set it up hadn't just recorded they'd been streaming. When Detective Harris delivered that news, Claire nearly collapsed. The idea that strangers could have been watching her daughter in real time was too much to bear. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she whispered, "Who's out there? Who's watching my baby?" Rachel was brought in for questioning again, her protests louder, more desperate. "I didn't do it. Someone else must have gotten into the house. Maybe someone broke in when I wasn't here, or roar when you were out. Please, you have to see it wasn't me." But Claire couldn't hear it anymore. To her, Rachel's pleas were just noise, excuses woven to escape responsibility. In her eyes, Rachel was already guilty. One night, after putting her daughter to bed, Claire sat in the dark living room, staring at the teddy bear sealed in an evidence bag. The house felt suffocating, like every shadow hid an intruder. Every creak of the floorboards was a threat. She whispered to David, her voice trembling, "If Rachel really did this, If she really betrayed us, how can we ever trust anyone again? David pulled her close, but his words offered little comfort. We'll get to the truth, one way or another. But the truth was still lurking just beyond their reach. And when it finally came to light, it would not only confirm their worst fears, it would devastate them in ways they could never have imagined. Because Rachel wasn't lying, and the real monster was still out there, watching, waiting, and ready to be revealed. The Ramirez home had become a place of dread. Claire no longer felt safe in her own living room. Every object seemed suspect. Every shadow felt like a threat. She watched her daughter constantly, never leaving her alone, terrified that unseen eyes might still be watching. Rachel's name lingered like a curse between her and David. Even as the babysitter's pleas echoed in Claire's memory, her heart refused to soften. But late one Thursday evening, Detective Harris called, his tone unusually grave. "Mr. and Mrs. Ramirez," he began, "we've got new information. You both need to come down to the station." The couple arrived within the hour. Rachel was already there, sitting in the corner of the interrogation room, her face red from crying. She looked up when they entered, her expression both fearful and desperate, but Claire's glare silenced any words on her lips. Detective Harris set a laptop on the table and turned the screen toward them. "We traced the signal from the teddy bear camera. It was broadcasting to a remote device via laptop that was later linked to an online storage system." He paused, the weight of his words filling the silence. The videos were being uploaded and sold. Claire's heart stopped. She couldn't breathe. Her daughter, her innocent, beautiful little girl, had been turned into a commodity for monsters lurking in the dark corners of the internet. She pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting the urge to scream. David slammed his fist on the table, his rage boiling over. "Who did this? Tell me who the hell did this?" Detective Harris met his eyes. "We found evidence connecting the uploads to an account registered under Rachel's name." The room fell into chaos. Claire whirled on Rachel, her voice cracking with fury. "You disgusting, vile traitor! You looked me in the eyes. You held my daughter's hand, and all the while you were selling her life to strangers? How could you? How could you?" Rachel broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. No, please, you don't understand. I didn't do this. Someone used my name. My account, it's not me. You have to believe me." But her protests fell flat against the tidal wave of anger and horror crashing through the room. David lunged forward, his face inches from hers, his voice a low growl. "You destroyed us. You stole our daughter's innocence. I swear, if you weren't sitting in this station right now—" "David!" Claire cried, pulling him back. Her body shook, her tears spilling uncontrollably. She couldn't even look at Rachel anymore. The betrayal was too big, too monstrous to comprehend. Detective Harris intervened, his voice firm but calm. "We're still investigating. Yes, the account is under her name, but that doesn't always mean direct involvement. Someone could have stolen her identity, used her information. We're checking all angles." But Claire didn't hear him. All she could hear was the sound of her daughter's laughter echoing in her mind, tainted now by the sickening thought of strangers watching. Rachel, desperate, tried one last time. "Claire, please. You know me. You've known me for a year. Do you really think I could do this? Do you really believe I'm that kind of monster?" But Claire's answer was a cold, cutting whisper. "Yes." The words crushed Rachel. Her body folded in on itself, her sobs filling the sterile room. The detectives excused the Ramirez family, promising to dig deeper into the evidence. On the drive home, silence suffocated the car. Claire stared out the window, her hands clenched tight in her lap. David gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding him together. When they got home, Claire went straight to her daughter's room, watching her sleep. Her chest ached as she whispered, "I'm so sorry, baby. I should have protected you. I should have seen it sooner." Meanwhile, across town, a man sat in a darkened room lit only by the glow of a computer screen. His face was hidden by shadows as he clicked through folders filled with stolen videos. He smirked, sipping from a can of beer, his fingers typing swiftly as he uploaded another clip to a hidden forum. On his desk, lying next to the keyboard, was a stolen driver's license. Rachel's face stared up from the laminated card. Her information had been taken, twisted, and weaponized. The real predator had never set foot in the Ramirez home. He had simply used Rachel as the perfect scapegoat, covering his tracks while she took the fall. And as Claire and David tucked their daughter into bed that night, believing they were one step closer to justice, the truth remained buried in the dark corners of the web. But it wouldn't stay hidden forever. The following days were a blur of police visits, paperwork, and sleepless nights. Claire couldn't eat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that tiny black lens staring back at her. The Teddy Barantz, a beloved toy now, sat locked away in an evidence bag, a symbol of betrayal and fear. Rachel's name was splashed across police documents, yet no formal charges had been filed. The detectives insisted they needed more proof. But for Claire and David, patience was impossible. Their home felt contaminated, their sense of safety shattered beyond repair. One evening, Detective Harris called again. His voice was steady, but there was a weight to it that made Claire's stomach knot. "We've uncovered new evidence," he said. "I need you both to come in tomorrow. And bring Rachel, too. It's time we settle this face to face." The next day, the conference room at the police station buzzed with tension. Rachel sat hunched in a chair, her face pale, her eyes swollen from days of tears. Claire and David entered with stiff shoulders, their anger simmering just beneath the surface. Detectives surrounded the table, laptops and files spread before them. Detective Harris clicked a button, and a series of videos appeared on the screen. The footage was grainy but clear enough to chill the blood. Claire's daughter played in her bedroom, sang to her stuffed animals, changed into pajamas, all innocent moments now twisted into something vile by the unseen eyes that had captured them. Claire's knees buckled, and David caught her before she collapsed. She sobbed uncontrollably, clutching her chest as though her heart might shatter from the weight of what she was seeing. Rachel buried her face in her hands, crying out, oh my God, no, please, no." Detective Harris let the silence hang, the horror filling the room. Then he spoke. "These videos were uploaded under an account tied to Rachel's name, but further analysis shows something interesting. The IP addresses don't match her home, her phone, or anywhere she's ever been. Instead, they trace back to a known cybercriminal in another part of the city." Rachel's head snapped up, tears glistening in her eyes. "So you see, it wasn't me. I told you I didn't do this." But Claire couldn't process the words. She stood, pointing a shaking finger at Rachel, her grief turning to rage. "Don't you dare act innocent. My baby's life, her privacy, was stolen because of you. Even if you didn't press the button, it's still your fault. Your name, your account, it all leads back to you." Rachel shook her head violently, her voice breaking. "I was framed. Someone stole my information. You have to believe me. Claire, I love your daughter like she's my own sister. I would never—" "Stop it!" Claire screamed, slamming her fists onto the table. Her tears blurred her vision as she collapsed into the chair, sobbing into her hands. The image of her daughter changing clothes under the camera's watch replayed in her mind over and over, each time cutting her deeper. David leaned forward, his voice low and trembling with rage. "I don't care if it wasn't you personally. This happened because of you. You brought this into our lives. You betrayed our trust." Rachel's cries filled the room. "No, please, no, you're wrong." The detectives watched silently, letting the storm rage, knowing that sometimes confrontation brought truths to light. But for Claire and David, there was no truth that could soothe the pain. Their daughter's innocence had been violated, their sanctuary destroyed. Whether Rachel was guilty or not hardly mattered anymore. Their world had been poisoned, and she was part of it. At that moment, Claire's anger turned to something darker, despair. She whispered through her sobs, "How do I ever explain this to her when she's older? How do I tell her that strangers watched her without her knowing? That she was. Her voice broke, the words too painful to finish. Detective Harris placed a hand on the table, his voice firm. "We will find the man behind this. I promise you. Rachel may have been used, but the real criminal is still out there. And we're going to bring him in." But promises couldn't mend shattered hearts. The confrontation had left them all broken, Claire drowning in grief, David seething with rage, Rachel collapsing under the weight of accusations she couldn't shake. As they left the station that day, Claire held her daughter close, as though by clutching her tighter she could protect her from the evils of the world. But deep inside, she knew the damage had already been done. And across the city, in a dingy apartment filled with computer screens, the real predator smiled. He watched the chaos unfold on his hidden forums, delighting in the pain he had caused, hidden safely behind stolen identities and anonymous usernames. For him, this was just another day's work. For the Ramirez family, It was the destruction of everything they had once believed safe. The confrontation had ended, but the war was far from over. The days following the confrontation at the police station were the darkest Claire had ever endured. Nightmares kept her awake, and when she did sleep, they were filled with images of her daughter's stolen innocence. She would wake up drenched in sweat, her heart racing, her mind replaying the grainy videos shown in that stark conference room. David tried to be strong, but his strength was unraveling too. His hands trembled as he scrolled endlessly through online forums about similar cases, trying to understand how predators worked, how they were caught, and most haunting of all, how long these horrific videos could stay circulating once uploaded. His anger became fuel, burning inside him, until every breath was heavy with the need for justice. One evening, after tucking their daughter into bed, Claire sat on the living room floor, her head in her hands. David crouched beside her, his jaw clenched. "We can't just wait for the police," he said. His voice was low but steady, filled with the kind of determination that comes when there's nothing left to lose. Claire looked up at him, her eyes swollen from crying. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we fight," David replied. "Not just for her, for every family this has happened to. We find this monster, we expose him, and we make sure he never does this to another child again." Claire's fear and grief slowly gave way to something else, a spark of fire she thought she had lost. She nodded, her lips trembling. "Yes, we fight." The next day, they began their crusade. They joined online parent groups, connected with other families who had been victims of hidden cameras, and started to share their story anonymously. The responses were overwhelming. Parents from across the country flooded their inboxes with tales of betrayal, fear, and outrage. It was bigger than them, much bigger. Meanwhile, Detective Harris called with an update. The cybercriminal they had been tracking had slipped away again, erasing his digital footprints, hiding behind stolen identities. But he had left fragments be enough to give them hope. "We're getting closer," Harris assured them. "But this isn't easy. These people are experts at vanishing." For Claire and David, that wasn't good enough. They couldn't sit idly by. They started their own digging, using everything David had learned from hours of research. He scoured forums, traced usernames, and followed threads of conversations that hinted at an underground network trading stolen videos. Every discovery felt like a piece of a horrific puzzle coming together. One night, after days of searching, David slammed his fist onto the desk. "I found him," he whispered. His voice was a mixture of triumph and dread. On the screen was a username that matched the one tied to Rachel's stolen identity, posting in real time on a hidden forum. Claire's heart pounded. "What do we do?" David didn't hesitate. "We take this to the police. Now." Detective Harris listened carefully as David laid out the trail of evidence. For the first time, the detective's guarded expression cracked into something resembling hope. "This might be it," he said. "This might be the breakthrough we needed." Days later, there was a raid. Police stormed into a dingy apartment. the air thick with dust and the hum of multiple computer fans. Screens lit up the room with grotesque thumbnails of stolen videos, and there he was, the predator who had violated their lives. A man with hollow eyes, greasy hair, and a twisted smirk, as if even capture couldn't erase the power he thought he had held. The arrest was brutal but swift. Hard drives were seized, devices dismantled, and evidence secured. For Claire and David, watching the man led away in handcuffs was both relieving and agonizing. They had wanted this moment, had dreamed of it, but no amount of justice could erase the scars burned into their hearts. That night, as news of the arrest spread, Claire sat beside her daughter's bed, brushing strands of hair from her sleeping face. She whispered softly, more to herself than to the child, "You're safe now. We did it. We protected you." But deep inside, she knew safety was an illusion. The damage had been done, the innocence stolen, and no arrest could give it back. David joined her, wrapping an arm around her trembling shoulders. "We won," he said firmly, though his eyes betrayed the exhaustion of a man who had fought too long in the dark. "He's gone. It's over." Claire leaned into him, her tears falling silently onto their daughter's blanket. She wanted to believe him, but the pain was carved too deep. In the days that followed, media outlets picked up the story. Headlines spread across the country. Parents help police capture cyber predator who exploited children. The Ramirez family became unwilling faces of a movement, their story resonating with millions who lived in silent fear of invisible threats. Justice had been served, yes, but victory tasted bitter, tainted by trauma. Because behind every headline, every arrest, every moment of triumph, there was still a child who had been watched, a family who had been broken, and a home that would never feel the same again. And for Claire, the hardest part was still to come, the day her daughter would be old enough to ask why her favorite teddy bear had disappeared. Weeks passed since the arrest, yet the Ramirez household remained haunted. Though the predator was locked away, his shadow lingered in every corner of their home. Claire found herself flinching at the smallest sounds, jumping whenever the baby monitor crackled, staring too long at toys to make sure no one had tampered with them. David, once the steady foundation of their family, had grown withdrawn. He spent hours in silence, sitting in the dark living room after work, the glow of his phone lighting his face as he scrolled through news updates, searching for reassurance the man would never walk free again. But even with the evidence stacked against him, the trial loomed, and there was always the chilling thought, what if he found a way out? Their daughter, blissfully unaware, continued to laugh and play, her innocence shining like a fragile light in the darkness. It was this innocence that tore Claire apart. Every time she saw her child clutch a toy or giggle without fear, she was reminded of the nightmarish betrayal that someone had seen her daughter not as a child, but as content to be sold. Therapy became their new routine. Claire sat with a soft-spoken counselor who encouraged her to unpack the trauma, to face the endless cycle of guilt, fear, and rage. "You couldn't have known," the counselor reminded her gently. "You couldn't have prevented something you never imagined possible." But Claire still blamed herself. She replayed every decision hiring Rachel, trusting too easily, not noticing the shifts in behavior that seemed so obvious in hindsight. The guilt was a wound that refused to close. David attended his own sessions, though reluctantly. His counselor told him what Claire already knew, that he carried his trauma as anger, a constant need to control the uncontrollable. And sometimes that anger spilled over into their marriage. Arguments flared over little things bills, cleaning, the simple exhaustion of trying to keep going. The bond that had once felt unbreakable now cracked under the pressure of survival. One particularly heavy night, after another argument about whether they should move houses, Claire broke down in tears. "I can't live here anymore," she confessed, her voice shaking. "Every wall reminds me of what happened. Every toy, every shadow. It's like I'm being watched all over again." David closed his eyes, his face lined with pain. He wanted to argue, to cling to the life they had built, but deep down, he knew she was right. This house would never be a home again. So, they packed up their lives, boxing up memories both joyful and painful, and moved to a new neighborhood. The new house was bright, filled with sunlight, and untouched by their past. Yet even in the light, the darkness followed. The trial began months later, and the Ramirez family was called to testify. Claire took the stand, her voice trembling as she described discovering the hidden camera. David's fists clenched as he recounted the betrayal, the sleepless nights, the rage that ate at him every waking hour. The courtroom was packed, journalists scribbling notes, parents glaring with disgust at the predator seated across from them. The man showed no remorse. His eyes were cold, his smirk faint but unmistakable. It enraged David, but Claire gripped his hand tightly, whispering, "Don't let him win." The jury deliberated for hours that felt like days. Finally, the verdict came, guilty on all counts. The predator was sentenced to decades behind bars. For the first time in months, Claire and David felt the faintest release of pressure, as if the chains tightening around their hearts had loosened. Still, the victory was complicated. Walking out of the courthouse, reporters swarmed them, cameras flashing, microphones shoved into their faces. "How do you feel? Do you think justice was served? What would you say to other parents?" Claire stood still, holding her daughter close. "I'd say never let your guard down. Evil hides where you least expect it. We trusted someone we thought was family, and it almost destroyed us. But we fought back, and we'll keep fighting for her and for every child who deserves to feel safe." Their story spread even further, turning them into reluctant advocates for child safety. Support poured in from around the world, but so did criticism. Some accused them of exploiting the tragedy, of profiting off their pain by telling their story. The weight of judgment was crushing, but Claire and David knew the truth. They weren't seeking fame, they were seeking to make sure no one else lived their nightmare. At night, when the house was quiet, Claire sometimes stood by her daughter's bed, watching her chest rise and fall. She thought about the innocence she had fought to protect, the battle scars she would carry forever, and the fragility of trust. David would join her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Neither of them spoke, because there were no words big enough to capture the weight of everything they had survived. But in that silence, there was understanding. Their lives would never return to what they were before. Safety, once taken for granted, was gone forever. Yet through the pain, through the loss, one truth remained. They had fought for their daughter, and they had won. And for them, that was enough to keep moving forward, even with the shadows that would always follow. Time became both a healer and a thief in the Ramirez family's life. Months blurred into a new normal, though the scars of their ordeal never fully faded. The trial was over, the predator imprisoned, and Rachel's name cleared, but the memories still pulsed beneath the surface of their daily lives like an invisible wound. Claire often woke in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, her heart pounding from nightmares where unseen eyes still watched from the shadows. She would slip quietly into her daughter's room, kneeling by her bed just to hear the steady rhythm of her breathing, reminding herself that she was safe, that the worst was behind them. David, though steadier now, had also been changed. He no longer trusted easily. Every time a repairman entered the house or a new teacher introduced themselves at school, his suspicion flickered like a warning light. To him, danger lurked in ordinary places, and that vigilance, though exhausting, became part of how he loved his family. But not all the changes were heavy. In the wake of their suffering, the Ramirez family found a strength they hadn't known they possessed. They leaned on each other in new ways, Claire finding comfort in David's quiet strength, David relying on Claire's unwavering resolve, and both of them cherishing every laugh, every small milestone their daughter reached. Their love, tested by fire, had endured. Community support also became a lifeline. Other parents, moved by their story, gathered around them. Claire began speaking at local schools and community centers about child safety, teaching families how to recognize hidden dangers, how to talk openly with their children about boundaries and trust. Though her voice often trembled with emotion, her words carried weight, born from lived horror and resilience. David, too, found his role. He joined organizations dedicated to tracking and shutting down online predators, channeling his rage into action. What had once been an uncontrollable fury became a weapon sharpened by purpose. For the first time since their nightmare began, he felt in control not of what had already happened, but of what he could prevent from happening to others. Still, healing was not linear. There were good days, filled with laughter and light, and there were bad days when shadows crept back in, when the weight of betrayal pressed down too heavily. But each time, they reminded themselves they had survived, they had endured. One summer evening, months after the trial, Claire sat on the porch with her daughter curled in her lap. The sky was painted in soft hues of orange and pink, the air warm and calm. Her daughter looked up at her with innocent eyes and asked, "Mommy, are the bad people gone now?" Claire swallowed hard, her throat tightening. She wanted to say yes, to promise her daughter that no shadows remained. Instead, she held her close and whispered, "The bad people can't hurt us anymore. And no matter what, Mommy and Daddy will always keep you safe." Her daughter smiled, satisfied with that answer, and went back to playing with her doll. For Claire, the moment was bittersweet. It was a reminder of how fragile safety could be, but also how fiercely she and David had fought to protect it. Later that night, as the three of them sat together on the couch watching a movie, David reached for Claire's hand. He didn't say anything, he didn't have to. In that simple gesture was the story of everything they had endured: the betrayal, the terror, the fight for justice, and the long road to healing. They knew the scars would remain. They knew trust would never come as easily as it once had. But they also knew something more powerful, that their love, their unity, and their resilience would always carry them through. As Claire leaned her head against David's shoulder and listened to their daughter's laughter fill the room, she realized something important. Yes, their story had been one of betrayal and pain, but it was also one of survival, of rising from ashes, of reclaiming what mattered most. And though shadows would always exist in the world, within their little family, light had returned.